Okay, so I want to talk about how we don't need permission to be intelligent. Because sometimes when we make these sort of commentary videos, these discourse videos, these videos on these various sort of so called prestigious subjects or something like that, we will be sort of, people will come in trying to shut us down or discredit us or sort of trying to push us back in our lane or box or role. Okay. Because personally, I have experienced that type of thing where, like, and I'm aware of what's happening, right? I'm sort of thug coded. Okay. People look at me and they're like, you're sort of subconsciously thinking, low key, you know, pondering, why isn't he in jail? How is he speaking coherent sentences? It's like society has sort of dictated these roles for us, right? Based on our appearance and our, personalities and that type of thing. And when you sort of step out of your role, you're kind of a police, sometimes aggressively back into this role that you're supposed to be playing. Okay. And no, 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 no. The, the interesting thing about that is it's actually just seems to be like lazy. Like at some part of it, it just seems to, it's more convenient, but we don't really get to sort of oversimplify people, overgeneralize people just for this sort of convenient sort of society. So, right, like you're, oh, so this is how you superficially are. You're going to do this and we're going to do that type of thing, right? Then there just seems to be this sort of, connected to that, this sort of anxious and, anxious, cautious, almost paranoid type of thing there where we, every, we want this sort of predictable experience, predictable and controllable. Like it makes reality more manageable. Like I think there was like someone that were talking about like the 1950s or something, and then they were like, someone was like, it may be bad to say, but everyone knew their place, right? We want everything nailed down so we have this sort of convenient, smooth, predictable, safe, manageable navigation, I suppose. Okay. Um, the only reason why that was able to even fly really was because of this sort of aggressive um, dictation, right? This sort of dictatorial, authoritative, tyrannical type of thing, and it's just harder to be tyrannical for various reasons. It's just harder to be tyrannical, so we don't have to role play these sort of narrow, flat caricatures anymore. Okay, but what I really want to talk about is how this is almost sort of cultural and or institutionalized now, because people will use sort of various tactics to try to push or police you into these sort of roles, right? And one is like, um, they always bring up education, they always bring up schooling, they always bring up college. What degree do you have? Or they'll say, let a scientist handle it. Or another one is, what do they know? Like if it's about a certain subject or certain thing. Like one time I was debating domestic abuse shelters, and they were like, what do you know about domestic abuse? Like, as if you had to have this specific work experience to critique them. It's like I don't need to be a professional. What you're really saying is, well, first of all, what they're saying there is it's like, of course, people who are within that sort of industry are going to have a sort of a blind spot or bias for that industry. So you're, of course, that's just saying like you're self-authorizing yourself as the authority by saying you have to have deep personal experience in that, or like a job in that, which is just like a shady tactic. It's like this not almost like impossible gatekeeping. You cannot open that gate all the time, right? But they're all what they're all saying in all these ways is like you don't have um they use it as like sort of a filtration system, but also again a gatekeeping system, right? Where you don't have, but that's just a way to gatekeep intelligence, right? What degrees have become are sort of these intelligence permission slips. But I don't need a permission slip to be intelligent, right? Because there are different aspects of that. You're hoping that someone who looks like me or other people that we don't that we will never have access to college. Okay, which is kind of foolish because it's like these almost sort of dated stereotypes that you're dealing with. People who look like me, there's millions of people who look like me who have graduated from college, but people are still clinging to these, you know, sort of dated still stereotypes, right? I mean, it just more shows the power of like stereotypes and ideology and propaganda and that type of thing. But and it also shows like there's multiple types of intelligence and that type of thing. But I digress on that. Um, but that's their hope, right? Um, and because how I know that people assume, first of all, people assume like, how do you know I didn't graduate from college? How do you know I don't have a degree in that subject? Because like you could, I've discussed all these different subjects, and I mean that's an assumption, quite an assumption there. It's like this sort of undynamic. It's just a very shallow, superficial grasp of just reality itself. Because like anything can happen, really. But I mean, they take these sort of superficial, arbitrary, incomplete clues, if you will, little signs, and draw a conclusion. Okay. But the conclusions don't even matter because, again, I don't need a intelligent permission slip to be intelligent. Because, first of all, um, I don't really care about college like that. I have access to all of that knowledge, data, and information as well. So just because some random person didn't verify it via a test, it's invalid. That doesn't make sense. And it's like you guys are pro knowledge, but you're really not, because the knowledge is only valid through these very narrow, specific channels that were designed to be a sort of social filtration system in the first place. Okay. And then, sorry, but sometimes I would want information that's not from someone from a degree, because it seems like you guys almost come out like this cookie cutter factory fashion where like it's typically biased, it's typically narrow, flat. Like you don't have, it's like you can tell when you're watching a movie, you can tell when someone uh if someone that person went to like film school or something, because it's like this, it's not their unique personal perspective or way of doing it. It's like this cookie cutter, you know, type of way of doing it. But sometimes you guys do that with knowledge as well. Okay. Because I've already experienced that plenty. Um, like I remember there was like on some social media site where a lot of you sort of intelligence police sort of reside. They were talking about just like different things, but I'm not going to even do the specific examples. There's just these knowledge gaps. But I knew that information, and then but I knew that information, and it's like even people who are supposedly have degrees or the experts, they have these information gaps because you went through these, you got this sort of curated spoon fed information, and then there's even like a snobbiness there where it's like I don't have to continue to absorb extra because I know it. But it's like you're regurgitating, like sometimes it's not even, it's like this stale knowledge and information, but then it doesn't even make sense based using other knowledge, right? So I don't really need, so basically the people who are sort of policing intelligence are actually, you guys actually, I really am not going to sort of authorize you to do anything because you guys actually even seem sort of, I don't know, inefficient in that area. Okay. So that's definitely gonna happen. But just because I'm saying we shouldn't, no, none of us should let people police our expression, our intelligence based on our origins, based on our appearance, based on where we come from, right? We don't have to have college degrees. I don't care if you are a high school dropout. If you have some insights, some perspectives, some knowledge to share, please do, and don't feel like you don't have sort of the space or that you need permission to do that. You don't need permission to do that. Like, because again, there's this cultural institutional thing about it where you guys almost know that you're doing this because there's this thing, this habit that you sort of um let's just call you academia castus. Is that the right term? Yeah, I'll just call you academia castus for now. um that you academia castus will um I'll just say castus people because there's a lot of overlap there too. Like sometimes it comes from a lot of white caste people where because it's like intelligence hasn't been white coded. Okay. But then it's academia castes and it comes from any people, like just castes, right? Because these are all caste roles. Like my caste role is a thug. I'm expected to be, you know, unable to even speak that well, and I should be like in prison or doing some labor somewhere. Some like, I mean, some like, I don't know, moving a box around to and fro. Nothing wrong with that at all, though. But I'm saying that's what they expect me to be doing. Very narrow, flat caricature of a role. But what these castists do, they're like, I'm not, like if they're talking about a subject, well, I'm not this profession. Well, I'm not that profession. So, is it a well-rounded um, idea? Is it a well-rounded theory? Are you confident that you know what you're talking about? Are you confident or that you know what you're talking about? Then say it. Like what you're doing when you're doing that, you are, it's like this tactic, this strategy that you guys utilize where you're saying like, it's like you guys are glamorizing yourselves, you're charming yourselves, almost like a spell where you're like, because you're deferring to them, but it's performative. And you're deforming to them because you're saying, you are, I don't mean to step on your toes, because as we know, you are the authority, sole authority on this subject, right? It's like you guys are just hyping yourselves, right? You're tossing coal into the hype train. And it's like, and then people sort of, kowtow to the hype, to any hyped profession or individuals and this and that. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, no, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. I'm going to discuss whatever I want. I can be knowledgeable in a lot of subjects. Other intelligences can be have intelligent takes as well, because that's another thing. It's like eulogical castus, right? There's multiple types of intelligence: logical, social, intuitive, creative, and practical. Eulogical types think you have sort of this monopoly on intelligence. Like, I think sometimes people confuse me for a logical type, and I'm not. um, I would say it's like average, maybe slightly before average, but like an average. And I think I have a bit of a higher social intelligence, so that can come off as having a higher logical intelligence, because I can just, you know, people with higher social intelligence have a way with words, verbalize, vocalize better, but no, I don't. We can have other types of intelligences and still have these intelligent takes, because sometimes we can all reach these same conclusions. It's just we reach it in different ways. But it seems like lot arriving at something logically is the only sort of sanctioned way or true intelligence, but it's not true, right? A lot of you very logical types will use, math or something to reach a conclusion or to achieve something. But like, look at something like architecture, just as an example. Like, to be an architect, you have to have a degree and you have to be good at math. But then look at the Incans. They had these elaborate, intense architecture structures, large stones that we still don't know how they moved. You can't fit a piece of paper between the rocks. So, and we don't know how they did that. Sometimes that's even hard to do with these current tools and technology. Many of them astronomically aligned perfectly. They had no written language. They had no written math. They were utilizing other types of intelligences to do that, to achieve that. But then they're saying, oh, this is only achievable through this. And sometimes it's more challenged, right? You guys, there's this logical monopoly on everything, where it's like, we can do it, we can do it, we can do this, when it's other intelligence types would excel at that, right? Have you guys seen those primitive technology videos? That's such a Castus thing to say, but they built this elaborate technology. They didn't know math. They don't know. They didn't go to college. They don't have an architecture degree. It's their practical intelligence that enables them to build these structures. Okay, but logical types are like, we got it. But then you'll have things where it's like, for example, um, since there's earthquakes in California, the hospitals and stuff kept getting damaged. So they're like, so they built a new hospital, and they're like, yeah, this earthquake is earthquake proof, and it's this and it's that. And um, there was a bad earthquake in California, and some of the highest casualties happened at this hospital. So you suppose it, like, you logical architects sometimes leave a little to be desired. I'm sorry. Um, Imagine these people that we call primitive, who live in these rural areas, very rural areas, like in the jungle. I want you to build our buildings. Can you do that, please? Or like, you'll see those memes. It's like a joke where they're like, it's like these stone roads that are still very intact, perfect, that were built long ago before all of this sort of requirements and all these other things, degrees. But then look at our roads now, crumbling, a hot mess. It's like, and then that demographic wants to give authorize police us, control us, say we're the authority. No, you guys excel in a lot of things, but one, it's just one type of intelligence, and two, um, other intelligences can, you know, thrive in that. Okay, and some things, a lot of things would be other intelligences would be better in that. You see that with a lot of things. Like you see this with a lot of TV shows and movies. They have, you notice how they're so formulaic because they almost take like a mathematical approach to it. These logical types sort of are making these TV shows and movies. Wouldn't someone with a higher creative intelligence be better in some of these roles? Eh, like, you know what I'm saying? But they're not, because it's like people with degrees, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, so a lot of, let's use that as an example. Like, there's so many artistic creative roles that you have to have a degree for, right? And they're using the college as a sort of social filtration system. They're using it as a way to keep this monopoly on things, right? Because then you can look at, like, what do you call those things? Um, Legacy admissions, right? So you guys were successful in that thing. So you're using legacy admissions to maintain these institutions and structures and networks, right? Hence the monopoly. But people, someone with a higher creative intelligence may not, they don't, they may be able to graduate high school, but maybe they don't feel comfortable in college, or they can't because it's college is so logical focused, logical, has this logical depth, right? So all these creative types don't have access to these creative artistic jobs, and the results are not exactly pretty. Um, and that's kind of thing. That's what happens when we're deferring to these intelligence police. Like it would be one thing, but then you guys are biased, right? And now you're power tripping. That's not a good combination. Um, like these schools, these education systems don't honor multiple types of intelligences. Okay, so we don't need permission to be intelligent, and we need to sort of unify and sort of take our rightful seat at the round table, right? To say, hey, this is how society should be structured and how it should, move and function and that type of thing. Because these, intelligence police, these reality police, don't have our interest in heart. Okay. And